Thanks so much for your time. So far, you're the only one that's won out of this deal.
It's not about me, Laura. I mean, this is about the portfolio, one which contributes on forecasts for this year to put $349 billion into the economy. There's 260,000 people directly employed. It's about them.
Do you support the deal?
Well, which one are you talking about, Laura? There's a lot of deals at the moment, and we're talking about a lot of policy issues.
Well, indeed, there might be a lot of deals, but a lot of them are secret at the moment. So the one that we do know about is net zero by 2050. You giving the government, the Prime Minister, the green light to go to Glasgow with that. Do you support that?
Oh, I'm a member of the executive. Of course, I support the position of the government. But we've gone through a lot of discussion, particularly in the Nationals Party room, as you would expect. I mean, we represent a very specific part of the country in terms of regional Australia. This is a difficult issue which involved a lot of detail, and my colleagues rightfully were treated with respect, with the opportunity to look through some of that and come to their own conclusions. The majority of the room supports the proposition, and absolutely, as a member of the executive, as I am today, as I was last week, I support the government's position.
But you voted no in that room.
Oh, look, there's all sorts of media reports, but once again, I don't talk about what happens in the Nationals Party room. It's somewhere where confidences should be kept, where people can have a discussion, where they can put forward their views as the representative of their constituents and their various electorates. But I'm here and in the Cabinet representing the resources sector. There's over 1 million Australians that directly depend on their jobs for the sector. I want to make sure it stays strong. And it's got a lot of growth, and it's put on nearly $100 billion since March last year on forecast.
Well, last week you were sitting in that very chair, you were talking to me here, and I asked you whether there was any circumstances in which you would support net zero, a binding target by 2050, and you didn't seem to even want to countenance that. Now you sit there today fully 100% on board because you're a member of the executive. What happened in the last week?
Well, Laura, as I said in the interview last week, my colleagues were having a discussion. I'm very respectful of their views and the opportunity for them to put them forward without influence, to be honest. It's a matter for what they believe is in the best interest of their constituents. There's a variety of views, as your program's been reporting this morning, but the Nationals had a majority position. I support my colleagues, I support the party's position, I support the government.
Well, can you just explain to the public, because I think, you know, you're a Queenslander, you know that constituents hate the most when politicians are disingenuous. What do you say to your constituents this morning that makes you, you know, someone call you a sellout?
Well, look, firstly, that's offensive. I mean, this is how things work in a democracy. We have a discussion, the majority view prevails, regardless of what individuals may or may not put forward. The government's put forward a policy which I'm sure the Minister for Emissions Reduction and the PM will have more to say on probably this week, one would imagine. There's been a number of discussions in not only the Nationals Party room but also the Liberal Party room where people get to put forward their views. That's how our side of politics works.
What's the difference between you and Labor now?
Well, in terms of how we work in a democracy, if you disagree with Labor, you get disendorsed.
On emissions reduction, I mean, you've got the same. The Nationals have the same policy as the Labor Party.
Well, it's a question of who do you trust. We stand by our track record on delivery. We make commitments, we deliver on them. We took a proposal to the 2019 election in terms of 2030 commitments. We've got reductions of around 20% of emissions. That's better than any number of countries around the world, including Canada, including New Zealand, including Germany, who are very outspoken on this issue. It's about actually getting things done, and that's what we do, and we stand by our record.
If you're so committed to net zero by 2050, why wouldn't you legislate it?
Well, these are decisions, of course, for the Cabinet and for the government.
Well, you're
the
in
PM
Cabinet
has put
now,
forward...
Keith Pitt. What would you say around that Cabinet table? Should you legislate it?
Well, I was in Cabinet before. Once again, you know we can't talk about Cabinet discussions, Laura, and I won't. That is just an absolute fundamental of being in the room. But you can be sure I put forward the views of the people I represent and the sectors I represent, because every single one of those hard-working men and women deserve not only to be recognised, but to ensure they keep their jobs. You can't trust Anthony Albanese in the Labor Party to make sure that happens. They are absolute ideologues.
How can your constituents trust you when you're making this commitment to net zero by 2050, but you're not willing to legislate it and therefore be held to account on it?
Well, we get held to account by the Australian people every 3 years. We put forward a proposition, they make a determination, they cast their vote. We'll be asking for their support again next year, whenever the election may or may not be.
Yeah.
And once again, we stand by our record, and that is a record of delivery.
Well, I assume you didn't wait a week and really 8 years to get nothing out of the Liberal Party when it comes to this deal. So what did you get?
All those discussions were between the leaders of both parties. Our room put forward their views on a number of issues, and there'll be more to say in coming days and weeks,
Okay.
Laura.
All right.
But once again, this is about regional Australia.
Sure. Let me put to you one thing that we've learned this morning. The Productivity Commission reviewing how regional Australia is faring under this deal every 5 years, but it doesn't mean that there would be a pause or any mechanism to stop that work towards 2050. Are you a bit worried about the effectiveness of the Productivity Commission? I mean, is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority and what's been done there the litmus test for this?
Oh, the Murray-Darling Basin's had roughly 50 reviews since it was implemented. I mean, I couldn't put them in a wheelbarrow and push them around the room. Well, we consider each of those reviews. The government obviously makes a response. In terms of the Murray-Darling, there are a number which are tabled in Parliament, and the government's response to those reports are obviously made public, and we take action where it's appropriate. Now, this will be the same. My understanding, I've only seen the media reports, Laura, is that from 2023, the first review will be completed by the Productivity Commission. They'll go through the process that they usually do in terms of reference and recommendations, and the government will consider the report in due course.
What about your candidate for Flynn? He says that he's going to go out and campaign against this deal. So when you're out on the hustings with him in Queensland at the next election, you've both got different messages. How does that work? Oh,
mate, I love Col Boyce to death. He's fantastic. He'll be a fantastic representative for Flynn if successful. He's a boilermaker by trade. He's into the cattle business with properties. He's a hard-working individual that's really reflective of the people that live in Flynn and around Gladstone. I mean, compared to the counter, the opposition's put up a bloke that's only ever been in local council. I don't think he's ever got his hands dirty a day in his life. So Colin's entitled to his view as a candidate, and I'll continue to support him. And we need him clearly to put forward his proposition. I want him to be successful, but he does reflect that community. He's a hard-working bloke. He's made his own way. He's got a trade. He spent a lot of time in the gas sector, putting all those pipes together to deliver the economic benefits for Australia, and I think he'll be a fantastic representative for Flynn.
Do your changed views now in Cabinet reflect your community as well?
Oh, well, my community, like all others, has a variety of views. We've certainly been taking calls from my constituents. And once again, there is a variety of views, as you'd expect, as there is on most issues. The things that I worry about for my local people is the fact that they can't afford to pay more for electricity. They certainly can't see an increase in prices. There's been commitments from the government around those issues already, but predominantly they are state issues. In Queensland, roughly 70% of the generators are owned by the state government. And to be frank, they do a hopeless job of managing the electricity network. Prices continue to go up, and in the regions you only have one choice, and that is the state-owned GOC for a supply.
OK. All right, Keith Pitt, it's interesting times ahead, let's say. We look forward to that detail. Thanks so much.
It's great to be with you.